All right, Algebra 2, let's get into Lesson 23. Lesson 23 is a really big deal, and so hopefully you're watching this video. So, factoring polynomials. So, factoring is when we're working backwards from the result to figure out what produced the factors. So, when we're factoring, it's like working backwards from multiplying. So, for example, when I'm multiplying versus when I'm factoring. So, to keep the video at a decent length, when I multiply, for example, x plus 3 times x minus 7, I distribute, right? X times x is x squared. X times negative 7 is negative 7x. 3 times x. 3 times negative 7. And I would combine like terms to get x squared minus 21. Factoring is when we start with the polynomial and work backwards to the factors. And so in this case, I would work backwards using my x tool. I have negative 21, and I'll teach you how to use this in a second. Negative 7 and 3. So my factors are x plus 3 and x minus 7. So notice the difference when we multiply the factors, and in factoring we're finding. So in multiplying we produce a polynomial. Factoring we start with the polynomial and produce. These are called factors. Okay, so I'm going to go over two different methods, but I want to start with the different kinds. So I'm going to start with types that have only a GCF. And so, for example, number 1, factor 3x squared plus 6x plus 9. So if I look at these three terms, 1, 2, 3, I notice they're all positive. So when I go to look for the GCF, I notice they're all positive. And I notice that 3, 6, and 9 are all divisible by 3. They do not all have an x. Notice these two have an x, but this one doesn't. So they do not have x in common. So I would say their GCF is 3. So to take that GCF out, so I'm going to factor out a positive 3 by dividing each term by 3. So essentially, if you need the help looking at it, I'm dividing each term by 3. So my answer is 3. 3 divided by 3 leaves me with x squared, plus 6x divided by 3 is 2x, plus 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now, I know that I can't factor this any further because I can't fill in this x tool, which I'll explain later. But if this is a 1, the top is a times c. I guess I'll explain it now. So that would be 1 times 3 is 3. The bottom is your b term. And you're looking for factors of 3, or the top number, that produce a sum of bottom number. And there is not a factor of 3 that will produce a positive 2. I have 3 times 1, but 3 plus 1 equals 4, not 2. So it is not possible, so that is why I can only take out a greatest common factor. And I'll get more to that x tool later, okay? So I'm going to do another one where I can only take out the GCF. So number 2, factor negative 4x cubed minus 10x. So there's a little bit of a glare, and I apologize. I'm going to look for a GCF. Now the first thing I notice is that they're both negative. And the second thing I notice is 4 and 10 are both divisible by a 2. 4 doesn't go into 10, so I can't do anything greater than 2. And I also notice they both have an x. So my GCF is x. So when I factor that out, I'm dividing. This is what I'm mentally doing, okay? You don't have to write this, but I'm mentally dividing each term by a negative 2x. And so that gives me a negative 2x parentheses. Dividing these first two terms, I'm going to get a positive 2. And I have a 1 here, so I'm left with x squared. When I divide the second two, a negative 10 divided by a negative 2 is positive 5. And my x's cancel. And so I'm left with 2x squared plus 5. Now, 2 and 5 have nothing in common. And so this is as far as I can go. Okay? So this is for only things that only can take out a GCF. So I'm going to move on to the rest of our factoring. And I'm going to show you two methods. I think one method you guys would prefer. So here we go. So factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay. Now when I have three terms, or even if I have, this method will even work if I only have the first and the last term. So in this method, I'm going to show you two. I'm going to show you my method. It doesn't have a name, and then it's the method I was taught when I was school, and then a method called grouping. Okay, so here we go. We're going to jump into number 1. Factor x squared plus 3x minus 10. Now the first thing I notice is that out front there is a 1. Okay, it's invisible. I'm always going to look for a GCF, but 1, 3, and 10 have nothing in common. So then I write the factors of the first term and the last term. Okay, so factors of 1x squared would just be 1x times 1x, right? The only factor of an invisible 1 is 1 times 1, and x squared would be 2 x's, x times x. Factors of 10 are 1 times 10 and 2 times a 5. Now, the first term should produce the first part of my factors, and notice they're both 1x. I don't need the 1 though, but I know these both begin with an x. Now, I have to choose which of these two to use, but I notice this big deal that I've got a positive 3 here. So I need to pick which of these could produce a sum of 2. 10 and 1, those would only give me a sum of 11, or 9 if one of them was a negative. But 2 and 5, I know that 5 minus 2 would equal 3. So one of these has to have a positive 5, and one of these has to have a negative 2. I didn't need to make my factors as big. And these would be my factors. Now, it would be okay to write these in reverse order, x minus 2 and x plus 5. These are the same because of the commutative property, right? 5 times 6 is the same as 6 times 5. So x plus 5 times x minus 2 is the same as x minus 2 times x plus 5. When it comes to our solutions for x, each of these is the zero product property. So x plus 5 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. And so in order to solve for x, I would have to subtract 5. So x equals negative 5. And I would have to add 2. So x equals positive 2. So those are the two parts that could be covered in this section, the factors and the solutions. Notice my solutions are opposite signs of the factors. X plus 5, my solution would then be negative 5. X minus 2, my solution would be positive 2. So that is my method. Grouping works really good for really complicated. My method works great when A is 1. Okay? My method is great. perfect when A equals 1. Grouping works great when A does not equal 1. Now, I'm going to do it for this one just so you can see it. So I have 1x squared plus 3x minus 10. Now, this is where I'm going to use my A tool. So A is 1, B is 3, C is negative 10. You don't have to write those down, but I want you to see where I'm getting it. There's 1, this is positive 3, this is negative 10. So in my X tool, on the top, I'm going to do A, which is, so A times C, which in this case is 1 times negative 10. So up here is negative 10. On the bottom should be my B term, which is positive 3. Now, in the middle, I have to put factors of 10 that add up to be 3. So the only possibilities, right, factors of 10 are 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. 2 times 5 would give me 10, but not a negative 10. So I'm going to make the 2 negative because 5 minus 2 gives me a positive 3, and 5 times negative 2 gives me negative 10. So multiply to get the top, add to get the bottom. So I'm going to take the following information to factor by grouping, and we'll get the same answers as over here. So you write the first term, then the middle two, and you're going to assign whatever's on the B term, and then the last one. Now, this is going to look complicated for this problem, but it comes in handy for more complicated problems. So if I cover these two up, I'm going to factor out the GCF between these two. The GCF here is just an x. 1 and 2 have nothing in common. If I divide each of these by x, I get x minus 2. I take an x out of here and an x out of there. Then cover up the first two, and now here's my second group. Both of these, neither are both negative and they're not both positive. So I'm going to take out whatever's here. Okay, unless they're both negative, don't take out a negative. So I'm going to take out a positive 5. 5x divided by 5 is 1x. Negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. Now, notice that these are the same. So I'm going to write one of the twins. So one of the twins. The other factor should be the GCFs that I took out. The first GCF, the second GCF. Always start your factor with the x's. So those are my factors. And you'd find the solutions the same way. Opposite of a negative 2 is 2. Opposite of a positive 5 is negative 5. Okay? So we're going to practice those two methods, and you can, as we go along, are like, hey, I like this method better. Great. Use it. Okay? So here's a more complicated one. 2x squared plus 1x minus 6. Okay, now for this one, notice A is not 1. And so this is where the grouping method works really, really nice. So here we go. I have A is 2, B is 1. This is, well, here. I'll do both methods again so you can see how they work out. So my method would be to write the factors of 2x squared. So the only factor of 2 is 1 and 2, and each of these would need an x. So since that's the only option, I know that what mine begin with. Factors of 6, though, are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Now, looking at this, I figure like, oh, I need a difference of 1, so I'm going to try 2 and 3. So 3 and 2. Now, my method requires some work, and that's the downside to my method. I then have to check to see if these work. So if I was to distribute this, I'd get x times 2, which is 2x, and 3 times 2, which is 6x. 2 and 6x, no matter what I do, 2 plus 2 minus is not going to equal 1x. So this does not work. So it must be that maybe these are in the wrong order. So x 2x. Let's switch 2 and 3. Let's see if this works. If I distribute these, I get 3x and 4x. Those can produce a 1 if I make the 3 negative. So I'm going to make the 3 negative, which means he's positive. And those, my friends, are my factors. So the answer is x plus 2 and 2x minus 3. Those are my factors. Now, this might be really nice where the grouping method works. So remember on the top, grouping. So the next method, 2x squared plus 1x minus 6. That's A, that's B, that's C. So this is negative 12 and 1 because up here should be 2 times negative 6, A times C. The bottom should merely be your B term. So factors of negative 12, right? Factors of 12 are 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. Well, this is the only one that could give me a difference of 1. So 4 and 3. And then would it be 4 minus 3 or 3 minus 4 to give us a positive 1? It would be 4 minus 3. So now I'm going to set up my grouping. First term, middle, last. So 2x squared plus 4 minus 3. That looks weird. So remember, these should look like the B term. And then last, minus 6. And then I'm going to group them. Notice there's 4, so we're putting them in groups of 2. What is the GCF between these two? Well, they're both divisible by 2, and they both have an x. So divide that out. You can pause any time. 2 divided by 2 is 1. X squared divided by x is x. 4x divided by 2x is 2. Now group the next two terms. These are both negative, so I'm going to take out a negative 3. A negative divided negative is a positive x. A negative divided by a negative is a positive 2. For this method to work, you have to end up with twins. So I write my twins once, and this is the GCF. And then my GCF's always beginning with x, 2x minus 3. Now, notice these are written in different order, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. Actually, they're written in the same order. But it's okay if you wrote 2x minus 3 first. So this method actually took maybe a little bit longer because I had to try things around. This method didn't work. Okay? So, next one. And we can talk about which method we prefer. So x squared minus 10x plus 25. Now, there's an invisible 1 here. So I'm going to use, because this is 1, I'm going to use my method. Okay? Now, if you want, you can still use your x tool, but I don't need to. 1x squared, that's 1x times 1x. 25 is 1 times 25, or 5 times 5. Which of these could add up to the middle term? Well, the 5 and 5. So I'm going to set up my factors. X times x, so x times x. I know 5 is the end. And we already talked about it would have to be a negative 5 minus 5. It would have to be a negative 5x minus a 5x to give us negative 10x. So these would both have to be negative. Another way of writing this answer would be x minus 5 squared because they're identical and there are 2 of them. So the solution, if that says x minus 5, my solution is a positive 5. Next one. So 4x squared plus 12xy plus 9y squared. Now I'm going to use grouping because that is not a 1. So the first thing I'm going to do, 4, 12, and 9 do not have a GCF. So I know that A equals 4, B is 12, and C is 9. So this is 36, and this is 12. Sorry, I have to unlock my computer. And sorry. Okay. So a factor of 12, that would give me 36, is 6 and 6. Right? 6 times 6 is 36. 6 plus 6 is 12. So now I'm going to use first, last, middle. So 4x squared plus, I got to use these for b. So plus 6xy plus 6xy plus the last term. So notice that's where I'm getting these and these. So grouping, I'm going to group 2 at a time. So here we go. These two have a 2 in common and an x. So that would leave me with 2x plus 3y, right? Because the x's would cancel, but 6 divided by 2 is 3, and I would need the y. If I group the next two, these also have they're both positive, so positive, and they also, actually these, 6 and 9 are divisible by 3, and these both have a y. 6 divided by 3 is 2. The y's cancel. I'm left with x. And here I'm left with 3y. Okay, so I'm going to write one of the twins, one with the GCFs, and another way to write this answer, right, they're 2 and they're identical, would be 2x plus 3y squared. Next one. 2x squared minus 98. Now, wow, the first thing I notice is they have a GCF. That 98, that's a big number. I also noticed the bx term is missing, meaning b equals 0. So my GCF, though, when I look at 2 and 98, I know they're both divisible by a 2. And I wouldn't take out a negative because they're both not negative. So I'm going to divide each term by 2, and I get x squared minus 49. Now I'm going to rewrite this so that I can see the middle term is a 0. So I'm going to use my method, but you could also use the x. You could do negative 49. The middle term is 0, so that would be a positive 7 and a negative 7. That's a factor of 49 that if multiplied would add up to be 0. So those are my factors, x plus 7, x minus 7. Notice the GCF just hangs out front. So these would be my factors. My solutions would be a negative 7 and a positive 7. So I'm going to stop there. I know this is a lot, but we're going to do more sections involving factoring. I think it would take too long for me to then also do lesson practice. So I'm just going to write your answers in case you want to practice a few, which is page 166. So the answer to A is 4 times 3x squared plus x plus 2. The answer to B is negative 5x squared times 4x minus 1. So that should be the first part of our notes where there was only a GCF. The same with part C, 6x and then 5x cubed plus x plus 2. All right, D, you had to actually factor, and I got x minus 3 and x minus 7. And it did ask for the solution, so the opposite of a negative 3 is 3. Opposite of a negative 7 is 7. E is x plus 6 squared. F is 3x plus 5y squared. So you can do the problems and check your work. X minus 1, x plus 1, and H was x plus 100 and x minus 10, and x equals a negative 110.